Oh, welcome back to the channel, guys. Well, it's been a little bit of an interesting week, good and bad. A little bit of frustration, a little bit of not frustration. I mean, that is now fully running and driving. Taking that round the block, absolutely golden. I've fixed some of the little running and starting issues we had on this. This gasket had perished. I'd put some supposedly petrol resistant rubber gasket in there. It turns out it was almost anything but, and it had completely melted and blocked up the choke mechanism, so that wasn't running, but now it is. And I've started looking at the shift mechanism. So I've pulled the shift mechanism out of this, and it was struggling to go into reverse. I couldn't think of any reason why, so when I pulled it out, I've had a little look, and I'm going to rebuild this because, I mean, the state of that bush, look at the amount of play in that. There's no way that that's supposed to pull down in quite that direction. So I suspect that that bush and the bush at the back are the source of my problems. So I'm going to strip this down, new bushes, and re-grease it and everything. But what I am wondering about is this looks like it's been welded at some point. I don't suppose, well, that doesn't look like that should be standard. So if anybody has a decent one of these from a 500, not a 126, I don't know if there's any difference actually, but a 500 one, and can just show me whether or not that should look like that. My guess is probably not. You know, there's no guarantee it's been welded on perfectly square, and that's potentially some of my issues. So I'll do a bit of research on that, get hold of a replacement if required, and we'll strip down and do a rebuild on this. This doesn't look like it's going to be particularly difficult, but who knows? Who knows? So it's a couple of hours later, and I've called on the Fiat 500 mafia, for want of a better word, all of my mates in the business, and they've all assured me that actually that is the standard original fitment crap welding weirdness. So that's fine. So Toto also kindly sent me the length measurement, which I will double check before I reassemble it, but I think that bit is basically okay. So what I'm going to be focusing is this part here, which, as I showed before, is the shifter mechanism. So I know that bush is worn out, so we'll change that. I've already got a couple of them on order, one for there and one for the rear of the tunnel. But what I'll get onto in a moment is I'll strip this down. Now, to strip this down, there is a bolt at the bottom. This gear shift lever is threaded on the end there, and I'll dismantle that and then spread it out on the bench, and you can have a little look at what parts make this up. And then what we'll do is we'll clean it all and reassemble it, ready to go back in here once the new bushes arrive. Okay, so here we go. Now I've stripped this all down. This is the main casing, the cage if you like, that fits into the car. Now again, on advice of Toto, I'm going to elongate the slots in the tunnel for these bolts here to give me more play in terms of adjustment. But again, I'll tidy that up, give that a little blow over. It looks a little flimsy down there. I might run just a little bead of weld along there to strengthen that up. I've removed the bushing from the back because there was quite a lot of play in it. They're two-part bushes, well, four-part bushes, I suppose. They've got little retaining collets. It's not a collet, that's a I don't know what that is, whatever it is, a little retaining bit of metal. We've got the spring that you compress to go into reverse, holds the whole thing together. It still feels like it's got a lot of tension in it. Nut that holds the thing on the bottom, washer, and then the bottom of the ball that sits in there. The gear lever itself is a relatively simple affair, and what you've got is that's the ball there that sits inside the shift mechanism. Now all of this is gummed up with some grease that is so solid that it might as well not be there. So I'm going to clean and strip all of that off, so that when I reassemble it, I'll pack it with some actual proper grease, or that is proper grease, but grease that's not 30 years old, and then it should lubricate it a hell of a lot better than it is at the minute. But anyway, that's what one of these gear shifts looks like. You can't really see the operation particularly well here, but that's your pivot point. So that's the important bit. That's what, actually, no, beg your pardon, that's not the pivot point. The pivot point is below that there. So it pivots about the bottom and gives you your shift. So your moment is at the bottom, not there. I'm getting mixed up momentarily with the Volkswagen gearbox, which actually has the moment of rotation there, and the shift lever attaches at the bottom, which is why when you put a short shift in a Volkswagen, if you've ever done it, what you do is you raise the gear shift lever up. That changes your moment, because this moment rotation is right at the bottom. The only way you could shift or make a short shift for this car is effectively to move it underneath the car somewhere. So I've gone over that with some industrial strength degreaser that I use for degreasing, well, loads of stuff, parts mainly in its neatest form, and this is where we're at. So as you can see, no residue of grease left on there. Likewise here, all perfectly free of grease. Well, I say perfectly free, there's a tiny little bit there, but that doesn't actually contact anything, so it's absolutely fine. And there we go. Doesn't look too worn or anything that could really cause any issues. I think it was mainly, well, I think at the minute it was mainly those bushes and the fact that all of the surfaces had such crusty grease on them that they were not lubricated in any way. So I'm going to have to wait for a few days because again I've ordered off Toto the Canby Fiat 500. For those of you that don't know him, I recommend him a lot on this channel. He's ordered, or I've ordered from him, a couple of replacement bushes, one for here, the matching one for the back of the tunnel, the actual gearbox end there, and I will be assembling those first, and then I will grease all of this up, reassemble it, and then we'll see how it all goes together. I'm not, as I say, I'm not worried about this piece. This piece is clearly original, even though it looks like absolute garbage. There you go figure. So I will get the camera back out in a few days, ready to start reassembling this whole thing, and then get it back in the car, elongate those slots in the tunnel, and then we'll adjust it and actually see whether I can grab reverse more than once every 10 or so tries. In fact, today it just wasn't going into reverse whatsoever. So a few days has passed, and the delivery of the new bushes has arrived. So as you can see, this is what the new bushes look like. Pretty much the same as the old bushes, except considerably less worn. They are still multiple parts. The metal areas come out That's to go in the back of the tunnel. I'll install that later on. I've already installed this one in here, and now it's time to start reassembling. Obviously, this has all been cleaned and degreased, so we'll start by just doing a little dry fitment on how this goes together. So this part, the linkage goes through from the top. So what makes most sense, to me at least, in terms of assembling it, is to install this part of the shift linkage in through here first, then we can drop everything down from the top and bolt it up from the bottom. In order to make installation of that a little bit easier, I'm just going to use a bit of silicone spray on there, because it is a much tighter fit in this bush than it was when it came out. So we'll slide that in there and loosely align it so that the holes are together. Now, I do not want to do this so that there is any dry metal on metal, so I'm just going to stick on some rubber gloves here, and then I've got some multi-purpose lithium grease here, and I'm going to use an absolute bunch of this to completely coat everything, so that we've got all of the parts with a big overkill amount of grease on them, because at the very least this means nothing is going to be rubbing that shouldn't be rubbing, and what's the worst that's going to happen is it's going to make a little bit of a mess when I tighten things up. But I'd rather it made a little bit of a mess and wasn't dry than have it all neat and rubbing and wearing away. So let's get to this now. Obviously everything is now sticking to one another, but there is an order of assembly. The way that this makes most sense to do this is if we put the upper cup on top of there, then we can get the shift rod with the spring on it, and we can insert it through the shift linkage like that. Now, in order to get this all fully assembled and locked together, I've got to get that bolt so it goes through there. Now we've actually got a handy ledge to sort of rest this on, so that's where you push down, and the detent pushes in there and allows you to get into reverse gear. For the moment that's pretty useful, because it means I can shove the ledge of the shift linkage under there, and it holds the bottom bit in place to allow me then to fit the last couple of bits, which is the bottom cup that goes in here like that, again nicely greased up, and on top of that goes a washer. And then I've replaced the nut that goes on the bottom there with a nylock nut. So I'm just going to tighten that down. Now obviously at the minute it's difficult to get that fully tight, because it's just going to cause this to spin, and especially with my greasy fingers that is obviously going to spin around a huge amount. So what I'm just going to do is pause the camera. I'm going to clamp the shift rod into my bench vise, and then I'm going to tighten that down. So let me just pause that for a moment. So I've now tightened that down, the nut on the bottom there, and we now have a nicely reassembled shift linkage. This connects onto there, and there is a screw that holds the two together. The other end goes through the bushing that I've got there that's going to be placed in the back of the tunnel, and then I'm going to slot those holes in the side of the tunnel a little bit longer, and we'll get that installed in there. But this is the main focus of the video, is reassembling this and rebuilding this. Now, it does look a lot better than it did when it came apart, and obviously that bush is now correct and not worn. So those things, in conjunction with some additional spacers, 3mm spacers that I've got to just drop the nose of the gearbox by about 3mm to help it line up, should mean that we'll be able to get into all gears all the time. So I'm going to stop that video there. Thanks for watching. That's how you rebuild one of those, and it goes from what it looked like at the beginning, all greasy and manky with absolute shot bushes, to something that resembles a nicely restored piece. I will then install this, and then we'll do another little catch-up video on the shift linkage and the actual shifting and how it all has gone together. So just get down on camera there and say thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please give us a like, please give us a subscribe, leave me any comments if it's helped you out, if you think I've done something wrong, if you think I could have done something better. All comments gratefully received. So check back later when it's all installed in the car, and hopefully the weather warms up above the minus temperatures that we've got at the moment, and we can go for another drive. See you later, guys.